Hello everyone, and welcome to the post-meeting recording of our third Instructional Design Lunch and Learn. It's Dr. James McKenna here, and I have the pleasure of being the coordinator of inclusive design. So why is this a post-meeting recording? Well, we want people to be comfortable asking questions and offering ideas. So we don't record the live sessions. Later, when we get to the question and answer section, we'll share some of the topics that came up during the session without revealing the individual participants. Helping me out on the original session was Thomas Amia, a distance learning resources specialist here in curriculum instruction, and he also hosted one of our sessions called Webcam Wizardry. So just so you know, if you haven't been to a session, we have two rules. The first is that you should make sure that you're muted unless it's your time to talk. Most folks are familiar with this, but we just put that out there every time to just give people a friendly reminder. And the second rule is, again, why we don't record them. It's the Vegas rule that what happens in Lunch and Learn stays in Lunch and Learn. So we have to be able to ask questions, venture ideas that we're not 100% sure of. And to do that, we have to be safe. So that's why we don't record them. So in this session, we're going to look at three core items: determining the problem, mapping the solution, and evaluating the effectiveness. And to do that, we're going to look at a prominent problem-defining tool, probably the most widely applied training evaluation model, and then discuss our role as LACO in each of them. In this slide, I pose this question to the audience: what does Tylenol cure? And if you haven't come up with the answer already, the answer is nothing. It alleviates symptoms, but it doesn't treat the cause of the symptoms. So for example, dehydration. Tylenol may alleviate the headache, but without proper hydration, the headache will return and other problems will go untreated as well. So let's look at it from a perspective a little closer to our work. Let's look at an example of how this might happen in a hypothetical school district setting. The teachers report high levels of stress while attempting to support students remotely. And several have already taken stress leave, and the union is threatening a walkout over the working conditions. The solution: provide them with mindfulness apps so they can get fully zen and just foo the problem away. Now, I'm not anti-mindfulness. I'm on the Calm app every morning as part of my routine. However, though simplistic as this example is, the point is that it's never that simple. But how often do we apply band-aid solutions? Just do this and not really get to the root. You know what? I think band-aids get a bad rap in that statement, because band-aids allow the body's immune and repair systems to function without further impedance from the outside. So they do help, but they're just not what's driving the solution. And then I asked our audience, if you were helping this district, what would you suggest they do? What questions might you ask? And we got all kinds of questions about what are the different platforms they're using, what have been the opportunities for professional learning, when are there scheduling times for support for teachers, what are the other supports within the district, what are the real causes of the stress and where does that come from? And so what that led us to is that asking questions is a really good idea in these situations. And the use of questions to derive to the root of a problem is the strategy behind the 5 whys. And this technique started at Toyota decades ago when a manager wanted to figure out why a machine kept malfunctioning and holding up the production line. So it kept tripping out. It was drawing too much power, and so it would basically trip a safety mechanism, and they'd hold up the production line, get it back into working order, and just go. But finally said, well, why is it tripping? Well, it's heating up too much. Well, why is it heating up too much? And followed that back 4 or 5 steps and realized that the filter for the oil that lubricates the machine was clogged, and that was causing a problem 5 or 6 steps down the chain, and that was why they were having problems. Once they fixed that, no more production stoppages. So working all the way to the root instead of just dealing with the symptom. So look at this problem again. The teachers are under stress with several requesting to take a leave of absence, and the union is threatening a walkout, and we not want to know why. So, first why. So why is that? Well, they're overwhelmed by the number and the complexity of the numerous technologies. Well, why? Well, they're not familiar with the platform and the video conferencing technology or how to create content. Well, why? Well, the district didn't have an adopted platform until late summer, and that left little or no time to train them how to use the tools of the new materials. Why are they so unfamiliar? Well, the technology's integration has been largely optional, haphazard, and mostly underfunded. So there's pockets of competence, but they're isolated from each other and the group as a whole. So the teachers all feel they have to create everything by themselves. Well, why is that? Well, the district lacks an effective system of support for technology integration. And this is sort of a line of because. Why? Because this, because this, because this, because this. And if we move back the other day, it's sort of a series of therefores. The district lacks an effective system of support for technology. Therefore, the tech integration is haphazard, optional, and underfunded. Therefore, the district was slow to adopt a platform and train and coach their staff. They lack the knowledge and skill to use the new tools. Therefore, they're stressed out and ready to walk. Now, once we have a clearly defined problem, we can use that to derive a solution. And if we can describe what it would look like if the problem was solved, we can work backwards to develop a plan to solve it. So at this point, I asked the audience to come up with a problem we might play around with. Well, was suspensions, lack of support, or ELD. And it was actually suggested that we look at not enough support for teachers to deliver online instruction. And so you got that into, well, there's not enough distance professional learning options for them to navigate. They can't go to in-person things. And so we talked about how a lot of times we go straight to that one Band-Aid solution. But really, this is more like a 4-step thing that we have to look at. So the solution state is the key. I'm going to introduce you to something called the New World Kirkpatrick model, and it's an evolution of the Kirkpatrick 4 levels, if any of you are familiar with that. So this model has been traditionally applied to evaluation, but it's really a problem-solving model that always includes some sort of learning experience as part of the solution. So rather than start with level 1, I'm going to lay out all 4 and walk back 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're going to practice with that. So we start with level 4, the results. This is where we decide what it might look like if the problem was solved. Okay? And then level 3 is the behaviors. So to get to those results, what do people need to do more of, less of, better, more efficiently, etc. Level 2 is learning. So what knowledge and skills do people need to have so they can engage in those desired behaviors effectively? And then level 1 is reaction. So how do we want them to feel about the learning experience and their own capacity to apply the learning? So let's go with level 4 and talk about it in the context of our example. This is where we decide what success looks like. And the purpose of training, as we know, is not to say we send people to training. It's to impact the workplace results. So we're creating and delivering learning because we want something to happen out where the people do the work. So this is where we tend to define key performance indicators like student data or whatever. Here we're talking about having the availability of professional learning options, high quality professional learning options, distance learning options for teachers. So when we have a body of professional learning that is available to them, we'll know we've got the results so that they have access to the things they need in the format that they can access at this time. And so then we talked about, well, what are the behaviors? What are the key behaviors that need to be carried out in order to produce those results? Well, people have to make, develop, and deliver these high quality digital and distance learning options. And we thought about, well, and with behaviors, you always think about, well, how would I measure that? And also think about, well, how do I support the people to actually put their new learning into action, to coach the behaviors, support the behaviors, reinforce the behaviors. And then we have the learning. So what do they need to know about in order to design and develop high quality professional learning? Well, they need to know what good learning looks like. They need to know how to use the tools that develop those things. They need to understand the instructional design principles, the design thinking, right? They need to know about adults and what adults need, okay? And then you also need to know about the constraints of their audience as far as time and platforms, so they make things that work for the audience in the ways that the audience can access them now. And then finally, how do we want our learners, our developers, our budding designers to feel? Okay, we want them to feel that they're going through some sort of training to develop these knowledge and skills was worthwhile, that it's relevant to their workplace, that they're going to be supported, like thinking, moving on from the learning. They want to feel like they comprehended what they learned, that they're going to remember it and be able to apply it, and that there's going to be a level of support for them to practice, so they're not all in this on their own. Now, at the county office, a lot of times we're working with, LEA schools and districts, and we measure the reactions of our participants. And then sometimes we measure learning. We're observing and doing formative assessment, but sometimes we might do a pre-post or something like that. Or if it's a certification course, there's some sort of certificate that has to happen, we probably have some sort of assessment. The challenge comes when it comes to geography, capacity, our relationships with our stakeholders, is how do we best support and evaluate, are we getting our learners to actually engage in those behaviors, and are those behaviors leading to the results that we're hoping to see in the workplace? So what we talked about in the live session is that, here's the learning event, here's the monitoring and adjusting. Normally it's not our LACO folks that are doing this. For the most part, it's the LEA's managers, the principals, assistant principals, the coaches, the coordinators, program specialists, all those folks are doing the monitoring and adjusting. So monitoring for behavior, reinforcing it. Also the teachers themselves, if they work collaboratively, okay? So not all those people will have attended our learning event. So we talked about, well, what are the things that we can create and provide to those folks so that they can better support people? Okay, and people see that this is not just send them to training, but sending them to training is the beginning of the long road to the results that they really want to see. And that makes training worthwhile because it's part of a greater system for performance improvement. So there was lots of discussion, but that's really what it was about. So I hope that's helpful. I will be posting this in our Padlet, our instructional design resources Padlet, as well as there's already some resources on Kirkpatrick and the 5 Whys as well under this column, What's the Problem? And so the Padlet link, we share it during the session, and here it is for you now. Odds are you have it, because that's probably how you got to this video, but there it is. Feedback is a gift, so even if you didn't attend live, if you enjoyed this video or you didn't, if you want to go to this tiny URL and give us some feedback on how we can make things better, and even offer suggestions for upcoming lunch and learns, there you go. At the end of that was the content piece. We did some Q&A, and that did it. So thank you very much for joining me on How Adults Learn. And once again, this is Inclusive Design. I'm Dr. James McKenna, and see you next time.